Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Labadorf. I'm a development officer as well as the director of Out at the J, which is our LGBTQ programs at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Welcome to our second annual Cinematters New York Social Justice Film Festival. Next up is our Q&A for the incredible film Breaking Fast, which is a romantic comedy that follows the story of a queer practicing Muslim man, Mo, as he finds love in Los Angeles. We are so thankful to our amazing partners who have made this festival possible. In particular, the New Republic, who is co-presenting this panel. Before I introduce our speakers for tonight, there's just a few minor things. First off, during these very tough times, we are relying on support from our community more than ever before to keep our virtual programming strong and keep us connected to each other. Please consider making a donation to the JCC so we can remain a thriving hub for resources, connections, and community for years to come. To donate, please text the word community to 56512. That'll also be placed in the chat. If you had any questions for the panelists throughout the evening, please put them in the chat box. And if your question is selected, someone from the festival team will contact you and we will unmute your mic so you can ask your question live. And now I am so proud to announce our awesome panel. We have director and writer Mike Mosallam, producer Seth Hauer, and Sue Obeidi from the Muslim Public Affairs Council, who is also who's also director of the Hollywood Bureau. This will be moderated by Joe Livingstone, the writer from the New Republic. Enjoy.
Okay. I believe that's our cue, guys. So I'm so excited to be here, so excited to be talking to you all. I loved this film. I just watched it last night with my wife and we laughed, we cried, we had a lot of feelings. So I have many specific questions, but let's start super general with you, Mike, the auteur. What in the broadest sense, the most specific, whatever you want, what is the inspiration behind Breaking Fast?
The inspiration, first of all, hi, Joe. Thank you for moderating this panel and thank you to Cinematters for having us. It's a pleasure. It's an awesome experience and we're thrilled to be here. So thank you. In the most general of sense, Breaking Fast was really a desire to create a romantic comedy a la the romantic comedies of the Julia Roberts era that had a lead, a protagonist that looked like me, that felt like the journey that me and my friends have been on, that looks a little bit like the world that I'm used to. And so we really sat down and thought, what would a Julia Roberts rom-com look like if Julia Roberts were a gay Muslim man living in West Hollywood? And now we have Breaking Fast and we're excited about it.
Fantastic. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the production side. I know this movie began as a short. So a little overview of the development of that idea from concept, Julia Roberts' concept, to execution and the beautiful film we have before us now.
Sure. I mean, I'll definitely start, and then Seth, if you want to jump in on any of this, feel free. But I'll say that I was sitting in a coffee shop with a friend of mine named Michael Lannon, who's the creator of the HBO show Looking. And he was asking me, who in film and TV, who represents you, who feels like your journey? And to be totally transparent, I was pretty stumped. I mean, it's not often that you find people, especially in film and TV, walking through life feeling as comfortable with their devotion to their faith as they are with their sexual orientation or where they fall on the spectrum. And he said very plainly to me, write it. And so frankly, I was not really a writer, but I had this inkling of an idea of a story that I wanted to tell. And I had great inspiration from Miss Roberts, who is just a gem. So I wrote I wrote the first draft of the short of Breaking Fast. And at the same time, my producing partner, the incredible Seth Hauer, and I were working on the same studio lot. And I just said, hey, would you ever consider taking a look at this, giving me some feedback? Am I crazy? And he said, you are crazy, but should we go on this journey together? This is a great story. He really built up my confidence in that regard. And then from there, we continued to develop the short script and produce the short. And then the short got had a wonderful festival run. We were lucky enough to go to the Cannes Film Festival and other great festivals with it. And then from there was just these lingering questions of, what happens to these guys? We want to know more about their story. And, you know, and we had conceived the short to all take place on the very first night of the holy month of Ramadan. And so we had this great convention of the month of Ramadan as a backdrop to a film. And we figured within the context of a feature, why not expand it to the entire 30 days and really watch the evolution of this relationship over that month. Seth, did I miss anything? Anything to add to that?
Not at all. I would say, I mean, I think that the film is unique in that we embarked on the short not as a proof of concept for a feature, but just as a short film. And it really was through questions and prodding from audiences of the short film festivals that led us to make it a feature. People were like, we love these characters. We want to see what happens next. And I don't know if we'd thought about what happens next before we got those questions, but it just made it clear that there was an audience for a feature like this. And so that's what we needed, was the confidence that there was a hunger for it.
Yeah.
I love the way that you describe that structural transformation from the first night of Ramadan, right? Sorry, expanding it into kind of a feature-length movie that is very highly structured in many ways, and I think that that's really to the benefit of the film. It's very kind of welcoming to an outsider, I think.
Thank you.
And that brings me to a question that I'm interested in, you know, Mike and also Sue. So maybe you can just kind of go back and forth or jump off from each other. But how do you see this? You know, this film going forth out into the landscape of Muslim representation in Hollywood and the broader culture. And I don't know, what are your hopes for it, your dreams for it, what are your predictions?
You know, listen, I can say a lot on this. I definitely want Sue to jump in. Sue has been instrumental in so much of the development and furthering of Muslim representation in the entertainment industry. I'll say for me, I mean, I think, you know, the one of the very first things that I ever did in my career was created a docuseries called All American Muslim, which was the first of its kind, right? It was the first time on mainstream television that we had a docuseries following a variety of families through a spectrum of religiosity, but really at its core, sort of talking about the Muslim American experience and sort of how that Venn diagram begins to unfold itself. And for me, that's where this concept of intersectionality and the idea that our identities as Venn diagrams are really quite interesting. You know, obviously it seems silly to say this, but I think for me, a film like this, All American Muslim, some of the projects that Seth and I do, and certainly tons of the stuff that Sue is circling, is furthering the idea that being Muslim is not a monolith. There is no one trajectory to being a Muslim, whether it's in this country or another country. I think culture has a massive play, gender has a massive play, all these things that sort of make up the totality of who we are. So I think Breaking Fast is sort of another extension of that idea, right? I think it's silly to assume that in the number of Muslims there are not only in this country, but in the world, that there aren't queer Muslims who have reconciled those identities as not being ones in conflict. And I think sort of just promoting the idea that we are not a monolith, regardless of where you fall within the spectrum of those identities, for me is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I wanted to just jump in, but before I do, I want to thank the New York Social Justice Film Festival and Cinematters, and thank you, Joe and Seth and Mike, you know, for allowing me in this space, and thank everybody who's watching. I wanted to just add that we're 1.8 billion Muslims, and when one asks, what do you think Muslims will think about whatever, and then whatever it is, you'll get 1.8 billion Muslim answers, right? I mean, the only thing that we agree on for real is the declaration of faith, that there's no God but God, and Muhammad is the last of the messengers. And that's pretty much it. I mean, literally, we can't agree when the first day of Ramadan is, or the first day of Eid is, and Mike is laughing and Seth knows because it is so true.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not going to shy away from this, but you know, Muslim community is not a community; it's Muslim communities, and there's a lot of intersectionalities, and the Muslim LGBTQ community, I'm sure is facing a lot of the same things that the Jewish and the Christian and other religious communities faced, and are facing. I mean, we all know that bullying, you know, the victims of bullying in America are mostly to, you know, kids of, you know, in the LGBTQ community. And I just don't want to shy away from that. So what Mike and Seth's film, and just, I love them both, by the way. And secretly, I just want to add that I was attracted to Mike before I found out I was 15 years older than him, and then he was gay. And so then it was like out of, you know. But what I want to say is Breaking Fast and the work that Mike and Seth are doing and are continuing to do is breaking down those walls and creating more understanding and acceptance and humanizing of the community. It can't be easy. And that's why I'm just so proud of them and being an honor to be here and to speak, you know, on their panel. So lived experiences, authorship, as you know, is it. You know, like, you know, one should tell a story that they have experienced. It's not that one can't tell us a story otherwise, but lived experiences are so important. And, you know, Mike's journey as you know, in you know, Muslim, you know, being part of the LGBTQ community, you know, adds to the authenticity of the film. And so, yeah, that's my short, long answer.
I also just want to jump. I want to say one more thing about this, and I think it's really fascinating. I think as there becomes more data points on Muslim representation, or just POC representation, othered representation within the context of film and television, we become less afraid that the one thing that is the Muslim show or the queer show has to encapsulate the experience of the entire community. So I think regardless of what one might think of this film, let it be the springboard of a continuation of many projects in which someone tells their authentic version of their story, so that just like when we're watching another TV show with a white, straight Christian man, we're not saying, oh no, that's not the Christian experience. Absolutely not. That can't be real. And we flip to a different channel. We don't do that because there are thousands upon thousands of those kinds of shows. Let us have more where we can say, this one wasn't for me, but this one certainly is, so I'll watch this one. And I say amen to 1,000,001 Muslim-centric things.
Amen, absolutely. I think that's 4 amens from the panel. I love the way that you describe, right, the value of that specificity, because there is such specificity to every character in the film, but there's something about storytelling which I think every storyteller has to deal with, the sort of interplay between the general and the specific, right? That you're exploring universal human themes in a way, but also, as Sue said really beautifully, right? Like bringing the authentic into that kind of what could feel like a very, you know, global universalizing medium sometimes with film. Seth, I wanted to ask you, and also, you know, if you guys just want to like talk as a response to a question, we don't have to keep doing like Q&A. Tell me, what was like a challenge that you learned from in working from this film? I know that sounds like one of those like interview questions, you know, for a job, but I'm actually very curious.
I would say our film, and this is not unlike any other film production, was faced with a lot of day-to-day challenges. It rained on days when we were shooting outside. We lost locations or location schedules shifted on us. But I think going into it, we had a good foundation of people that I think come from Mike's circle, my circle, and the other producer circles. Whenever you're making an independent feature, you kind of just need to make sure that everyone gets along in the beginning when things are going smoothly, so that you know everyone's going to continue to get along when things aren't. And we were really lucky in that regard, I would say. We had to shut down a day for a location, but the whole crew agreed to shift our workday week and made it happen, and was appreciative of the challenge, and everyone was really cooperative. So I would say we're really lucky, and hopefully we will on the next one.
I hope so too. Seth, I think that you should tell the WeHo Block Party story if you want to.
Is this the story about the
In the
location,
short.
the
Yeah.
scene being cut?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but we did have a scene where we shot in WeHo Block Party, and the scene, we had to shift locations. Is this because of our location shift with another? There's a location that we had locked in, and days before we were due to shoot the short, pulled out because the owners had gotten afraid that they were going to become targets of ISIS for cooperating with us. So that was like a big rallying cry for the crew to band together and shift story and location to go to somewhere new. We were kind of caught off guard. Not that we were naive, like we know that Islamophobia exists everywhere, but I think for all of us, like the non-Muslim crew members, it was like a shock to us on our Muslim brother and sister's behalf. And we had never felt that so directly. And it kind of galvanized the whole crew into knowing that what we were making was important. It has nothing to do with ISIS, nothing to do with politics. It's a love story.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Let me just jump in, even though did you finish your story, Seth? Sorry.
Yeah.
Joe and the audience, Mike, is the creator of was the creator of All American Muslim, and he is no stranger to, this kind of reaction, and with All American Muslim, which was the first reality show that featured a Muslim family, and really was Mike is a pioneer, and it cracked a lot of doors open. The show got canceled because it portrayed Muslims as normal Americans. And so there is a feeling of we can't win, there's that weird feeling. And with Mike's Breaking Fast and Seth's, Breaking Fast, there's that work that's being done where it has nothing to do with ISIS. It has nothing to do with Islam, Islam per se, but it's just a normal story.
And yet there are such interesting aspects to the film, related to its characters. I was thinking about the challenges of how you guys did the math on how much Arabic to include, where to switch. I thought that the reveal, the Shukran reveal, where it turns out that that Cal can speak Arabic, was just gorgeous. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Well, the best thing ever for me was Seth was a great barometer. Seth would say too much, too little. And what was great for me, I was sort of an advocate for less subtitling, but I also was taking for granted that I understood all the nuance. And so, having somebody who didn't speak the language as my counterpart was really good to sort of say like, oh, I think people might lose this or miss this, or this makes sense to you, but I feel a little lost. So, but also, I mean, to that extent, Seth understood that Arabish, or like mellifluously going in and out of Arabic, is so much a part of just my day-to-day, even with my non-Arabic speaking friends, because I just assume context clues will give away what I'm trying to get them to understand, and I just go with it, and people sort of just come on board, and it tends to work for the most part. So I think there was just a really nice understanding of like what was important to me and what felt real in terms of how these characters in this world spoke, and also listening to somebody else who was saying like, totally get it, except I think people might miss out on this great moment, so we should probably subtitle it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some parts of the Arabic were used, I mean, to emphasize like what characters would choose to say to each other in their own language, even when in the presence of non-Arabic speakers. I don't speak Arabic, but I think I picked up a little bit from working with Mike. We had two other Arabic-speaking producers, Alex Lampsis and Sarah Bazzi, who were on set, making sure that everyone's pronunciation was right.
And the amazing thing is that it was only Michael Cassidy, who plays Cal, was the only actor in the entire film who had to learn Arabic. Everyone who was intended to speak Arabic did speak Arabic.
That's fantastic. I mean, it must just make the job easier. So I thought that Michael Cassidy as Cal was just gorgeous. Haz Slimane was just gorgeous as Mo. Amin Al-Gaman was just wonderful as Sam. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit about, casting those actors, the wonderful chemistry that everybody had with each other, with just kind of, it sparkles. So yeah, how do you make that magic happen?
Yeah, we had a phenomenal casting director. Her name is Tina Becker. She's sensational and an absolute troop. At the early onset of starting the casting process, I handed her a list of 22 Arab countries and said, we can only see people from these countries. And then I highlighted specifically the countries from the Levantine and said, they have to speak this Arabic. And she was like, okay, I'll figure it out. And she truly did. She really, really did. I felt a bit of a responsibility, especially under the appropriate and necessary conversation around representation and authentic representation. Here I am, an Arab American Muslim director, and directing this movie that sits so specifically in this culture, in a culture that is just second nature to me, that I needed those actors to as well sit in that culture and understand it. And we were so fortunate to find just the incredible talents that we did, who appreciated so much the journey we were all going on. Haz has been a friend of mine for quite some time. We've been friends for many, many years. He spent a lot of time in my hometown of Dearborn, Michigan, and our paths crossed in New York when I lived there and he lived there. Our paths crossed here, obviously. And we've just always been, friends. And he was actually, fun fact, was in the short of Breaking Fast as Hassan the ex, but that scene was cut.
No way.
Yes, that scene never happened. So to make it up to him, we cast him as Mo. But Haz is a pioneer unto his own right. He is an LGBTQ out Lebanese American Muslim actor. He is, and to have him and all of the pioneering work he's done lead this film was really important and such a godsend and a real gift. He just absolutely shines on screen. And then Amin, who was initially a friend of Seth, but also a friend of mine, but more so for Seth. Sort of Seth and I secretly were like, he's Sam, right? Like he's perfect. Yeah. Not because he is like Sam, but because he is just so wonderful. We just were not sure that he had the comedic chops, even though he had them in real life. So we asked him to come in, and he was one of the first Sams we saw and probably one of the last. He was in and out and was just so wonderful.
Yeah. Prior to Breaking Fast, I don't think that he's been in a lot of comedies. He's been given more traditional Muslim roles or played a sidekick character. And we went to see him in a play that was very non-comedic. And so we had him come in and read, but it wasn't too hard for him to win us over.
I'm astonished that he hasn't played comic roles before, but because he's just...
I hope he does now. Yeah,
I know.
Amazing.
I'll tell you the truth, Joe. A lot of the Arab actors who came in would read the script, the sides, very heavy-handedly. And I would have to stop them and remind them this is a comedy, remind them this is just us talking. And it was, to a certain degree, such a foreign concept for them to be themselves and not be who sort of generic white casting directors are asking of them so often to be. And so when they sort of understood the tonality of this film, people just, their shoulders went down, people relaxed, people were able to sort of, live in sort of an authenticity that I think they forgot is who they are. I'll never forget on set, the brilliant actress, Rola Gardnier, who played Mama, said to me, this is the first time I have not had to cry over some terrible thing that my child has done or some terrible experience. She goes, this is the most fun I've ever been allowed to have. And I think that speaks to the hunger for this kind of mundanity in representation. There is something to be said about slice of life that we on the fringes don't really get to experience so often. We have to live within the deep pockets of a stereotype.
Absolutely. And I wonder if we could pivot there back to Sue. Like, if you could talk a little bit about your work with the Muslim Public Affairs Committee and
Sure. But Muslim Public Affairs Council's Hollywood Bureau.
Council, sorry.
It's okay. It's all good. It's all good. Just don't call me late for dinner. That's all. We're good. Impact Hollywood Bureau works in the industry to change the narrative around Muslims and Islam. And basically we do it by three different ways: consulting on film and TV projects. But the goal, to be honest with you, is to work ourselves out of the consulting business, because as more Muslims enter the industry who are telling their own stories, who are in writers' rooms, there will not be a need for us. And we pray that day is soon. And really, I promise you, at the inception of the Hollywood Bureau, we said for consulting, we want to work our way out of a job. The second thing we do is we connect, and we connect screenwriters to the mainstream industry. So we'll get a network, a streamer, a production company, a studio calling us and saying, hey, we just bought the rights to this book. We want authenticity as much as possible. Can you send us a list of, and then they'll tell us what they want a list of, and then the third thing that we do is we contribute our thought leadership in the form of speaking and organizing panels and writing and publishing opinion editorials. This this month, we have 3 panels at Sundance. And so we're excited about that. And by the way, it's consulting, connecting, and contributing, and they all start with C, so I can remember them.
Perfect. We all need a mnemonic. No, it's fascinating in this film, to me, the splicing of right, the affective experience of culture, right, like the political experience and the creative experience, the creative process, which is Mike and Seth's really. And I wonder, when you make films, I suppose, Mike, when you make films which have a specificity that you share as a person, I wonder, do people think that they know you better after they've seen it? Do they make any assumptions? I mean, I'm always curious about people who draw from life.
I mean, I think that just to a certain degree, yes. And I think that's why one of the most common questions I'm asked is this autobiographical, which it's not. But what is autobiographical is a portion of each of these characters, because as Sue has said and Seth knows, it's the old adage, write what you know. And that's in my first attempt to write a feature. That's what I did. I wrote what I knew. And I think to some degree people might have, I think it's fair that people make assumptions. I wish they wouldn't. I understand that they do, but I hope that those assumptions will at least lead to more nuanced conversations where they can ask specific questions and really, understand a two or thing about things that they don't know.
And hopefully the film will lead to people changing assumptions that they currently have about people that they don't know. Because I think that the film shows a side of reality that a lot of people don't know. So that's part of the goal, I would say.
On that point, it struck me while watching it how rare it is to see a film in which there aren't any like drunken scenes to move the plot along. That just, the sobriety is so unusual, and it really adds to the tension, especially, the erotic tension between the characters. Am I crazy for saying that?
No, it's
No,
true.
I love it.
Yeah.
Those are such writer shortcuts, I think. The drunken scene to just explain away chemistry, and we didn't have to because Armo and Cal had real chemistry. It's true.
It's great, and it's that awkwardness of first meeting someone, especially for queers, right, where you're you don't get to make a lot of the assumptions that straight people do about each other. You have to do a little fact finding just to figure out whether anything's going to work. And I love that as a prompt for character development.
Yeah, I think there was, listen, certainly wasn't on alcohol, but I definitely think people were in like drunken food states throughout the entire film. They just were eating so much. But yeah, like I love that. I thank you for calling that out. That's awesome.
That's true.
Well, food is obviously a big part of the movie. So much to say, so much to ask. How do you shoot food like that? How do you show people cooking? How do you show people shopping? How is it challenging? Cinematographically?
Seth, take it from a technical standpoint.
I think that the food part of it is probably definitely autobiographical for Mike and his best friend Sarah. They are constantly cooking delicious food and feeding people, and Sarah helped a lot on set, and we also have to shout out Open Sesame, which is this Lebanese restaurant in West Hollywood. So if you're hungry for the food that you saw on screen, you should go there. They actually came on set and worked as food stylists with us and donated a lot of their time to the movie.
But to that earlier point, Joe, like it couldn't have happened without somebody on the team like Sarah, who knew exactly what that was supposed to be. And helped our art department like really make sure everything was plated correctly, looked right, sort of had that appropriateness. I'll say two things about the food. The first is on film sets, there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of waste of food. Very fortunate that on this set there was very little waste. All the food on screen was gone nearly before we could finish eating it. So that's great. The other thing that I'll say is it is such a part of our culture, and this is sort of the Arab side, such a part of the culture, that I often say, listen, you come to someone's house and you have no food, you may as well move. And if you go to somebody's house and the food is bad, you might as well like literally change your name, because like you are prone to like some real ridicule. So, food plays its own kind of role.
It's a fascinating kind of locus of cultural politics. And Sue, I'm curious about what your thoughts on the food in the film. And
I love Arabic food, and so I know this conversation you're having. It's an insult if the food is bad. It's an insult if if it's bad and you're not eating it. It's an insult if you're not eating enough. All of it. Food is like, I don't want to say a religion in the Muslim culture, because that would be a little bit, I think I just created a sixth pillar. But food is, everything is around food. And when you care about someone, the food is kind of the conduit of how much you love someone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this dish called mensef that Jordanians are known for, and that Palestinians also adopted. And when you're invited to a home and they have mensef and the head of the lamb is not included, that basically implies like you're king and queen, like you're golden, like I will walk on a glass on for you, kind of thing. So food
as a side, sorry, Sue, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's just integral to the community, to the culture. And even when you go back to, for example, the history of Islam, whether it's in Turkey or Saudi or wherever, food is big. Like Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, breaking bread, there's always food. The Last Supper, food. I mean, it's integral to the culture. Sorry, I go on, and so go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, as an aside, this last year in 2020, I hosted a Palestinian foreign exchange student in my home, and his favorite dish was mensa. And so I attempted to make him a vegan version. Needless to say,
Yeah.
I almost was never allowed to the Middle East again, but luckily I made up for it in trying to reattempt it. But it's funny you should bring up mensa.
Yeah, and I mean, as a child who grew up in America, when I would vacation in Jordan, I would, see a lamb. It's like, and the tongue is like hanging out, like the tongue is like the best part, kind of thing. I'm telling you, it's a big deal. It shows how much you love the person.
And in this film, we see a relationship beginning to bloom, right, through food.
Yeah, food is a bond for them, but it's also, I mean, there's a lovely bookend in the film too about the quality of a certain dish. Mo's mom kind of has a little bit of a disdain for Mo's ex's version of mulkia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
Oh,
Seth.
the best.
And I don't want to spoil anything, but there's like a lovely bookend with how someone else makes mulkia in a better way.
It just might be a better partner for his son.
Yeah.
Maybe.
The character of Hassan is so interesting and so ambiguous, right? Because he's not really on screen for a huge amount of time, and yet he's very, very present, of course, in Mo's just subjectivity. Tell me a little bit more about how you wrote that character, how you found a place for him.
So I think the origin of Hassan really came about because we quickly realized that our lead character of Mo really does sit in a real place of privilege. He is wealthy, he is well loved by his family, he has reconciled his identities, and he just sort of has his stuff together in a way that doesn't show a conflict. And I think we had this conversation early on about how, and it really informed the dinner conversation that happens towards the end of the film, that Mo really, there has to be some accountability to how privileged he really is. And to that degree, we created a bit of a triangulation between Mo and Sam's identity, which is sort of, leaning into the LGBTQ side of things and leaning away from a more outward faith side. And then more of somebody who sort of straddles a lot of the muddied middle, which is somebody who just like leans into the cultural pressures, trying to not live within the sense of authenticity or authentic true self, and just trying to appease those cultural pressures and familial pressures. And I think we wanted all of those archetypes to be present because they are all part of a long spectrum of experiences within the intersectionality of faith and sexuality.
And Mo, by the end of the film, has such a different view of, well, he sees everything differently, than he did in the moment, and that's just what it is to grow, to learn and to grow, and to increase your empathy for other people. Now, I wanted to bring up the character of John, who I thought was really well played by the actor, because he brings in something of a kind of a rigidity or a lack of imagination in his disrespectful attitude, frankly, to being in Mo's house and being fed. But nobody takes his bait in the movie. That there's no there's no kind of passionate speech of denunciation of him. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the subtlety with which that kind of outside negative voice kind of comes in, but then goes out again.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way, and Seth, I'd love for you to also talk about this because I know how important getting the tone of John was right for you and for the film. But for me, there's John in a lot of ways are the sort of microaggressions and the sort of minor moments that I think other communities just sort of learn to shrug off or learn to sort of like chalk up to, well, that's that dude, that's what he does. And I think, I think like, yes, it would be awesome to sort of call out every single one of those things. And I think if I were writing the script now with having the year we just had, I think that may have played out a little differently, but certainly, this reckoning of those microaggressions is somewhat fairly new to the zeitgeist. And I think for me, it was like just kind of always living in a space, having a boss who says, ignorant, awful things, or having, people who I assume knew me and knew how important my faith was, assume I was like a quote unquote safe Muslim, or just say like really sort of, or even like things that men that I was dating and trying to get to know, and just like saying things that were somewhat harmless, I guess, but also not really sort of understanding the weight of their words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wanted to hold John accountable. There were so many versions of him, some that were a lot more outrightly villainous. And I think where we ended up is with a character who we are probably pretty generous with, but his outlook kind of stems more from ignorance and cluelessness than actual maliciousness. He's just kind of uneducated about the people around him, and that's not an excuse by any means for his behavior. But I think we wanted to like leave room for characters like that to be welcomed and give them a chance to grow. We don't see any growth from him. We kind of move on from him in the film, but I like to think that maybe whenever things ended with him and another character in the movie, he would go on and ask himself questions about what he should do differently.
But we can assure you he won't get a spin-off because we don't really care that much.
But we will say Christopher Hankey is the actor who plays him, did a great job at straddling that line of like cringe, but also we can stand his company. We don't need to kick him out of the room.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Christopher Hankey. He's an awesome guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just thought it was great how, he didn't really suck that much oxygen out of the room. He wasn't allowed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think we have a huge amount of time left. In fact, we don't have much. So I wondered, Sue, is there a way that people in the city or just people who are interested, who want to support your work, what can fans of Breaking Fast do to get involved?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, just zooming out and what can you do to help, Muslims in the entertainment industry. And then I'll zoom in to answer specifically your question. First of all, be a Mike Mosallam. And what that means, right, Seth? You're nodding. You know what that means. Mike is the best mentor there is for anyone. He has opened so many doors for so many people. He has nurtured and mentored screenwriters, made introductions, and really given so much of his time to Muslims in Hollywood, specifically screenwriters, specifically, and I think producers and directors. So, so be a Mike Mosallam, make the introductions, make the connections, crack the doors open, give advice. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of creating your own competition, because so much, like in my work that I see in a marginalized community, and I'm speaking only from my vantage point, that a lot of people think that there's only one slice of the pie, and if my organization is leading the way in something, that means something else isn't happening. That's not the case. We need to be there for each other. So be a Mike Mosallam. Number two, to answer your question, Joe, about what can we, how can Breaking Fast like help move the needle? Watch the film. The subject matter in the Muslim community, depending on which Muslim community you're talking to, whether it's a conservative, moderate, or liberal, it could be a very, 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 very difficult conversation. But introduce it to your friends as much as possible. Get it out there, so to start that conversation. because we need to get to a place, where we, how do I say this? Like, in Islam, we have to defend each other. And so, we have to be there for each other. And this movie is a vehicle to starting to that conversation. And Mike knows what I mean, just coming from the community and the conversations we've had. Again, the Muslim communities is not different than what the Jewish community went through and is going through, and all the other, Catholic and Christian and other faith-based communities. But in order to get to a place where we need to be, we have to have those conversations. And God gave us humanity. We were born with humanity, and no one should be able to take it away because of anything, of sexuality. And I know in Islam, sexuality is very private, by the way, very private. Whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, it's a very private thing. You do what you do, and you do what you do, and so it's not, but so it's a very difficult conversation. So the film is definitely a vehicle for a conversation to move that needle forward.
And Mike and Seth, finally, where can people watch Breaking Fast and when?
Well, we come out, our release is next
I'm
Friday.
out.
We come out commercially in the US and Canada, I believe, next Friday, January 22nd. Come find us on iTunes Movies. We'll post a link on our website, breakingfastfilm.com, whenever we have it. And I think wherever you can buy or rent movies, you'll be able to find us on those platforms starting next Friday.
Inshallah.
And if you like it, it helps us to for you to go into IMDb or go into Google, rate it, tell your friends, write a review. All of this will help, like a small indie feature like ours, really find its audience.
And if you don't like it, just lie. Say you loved it. Just go for it. God understands.
Yeah, and as a critic, I approve of that too. Absolutely. Now, congratulations, Mike and Seth. What a beautiful film. I absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for joining us, Sue.
Thank you,
pleasure.
Joe, for this lovely conversation. It's I wish we were in person.
I know, and I wish we had 2 more hours, but maybe we'll do something similar again.
It's God willing.
Okay, so I think I have to, I'm handing back to Mark now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was so much fun.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Joe, Sue, Mike, and Seth for such an incredible panel. You all are welcome back at the JCC and Cinematters anytime. We'd love to have you. And also a special thanks to everybody here in the audience who's joined us. And a thank you to New Republic for partnering. For those of you who are here, please be on the lookout for more information and resources regarding themes of the event. In the next few days, you'll be getting an email with a lot more information. And next this evening, as part of our Cinematters After Dark series, we are having a cocktail demonstration and conversation with Spice and Spirit. And tomorrow, please join us again for a full day of films and conversations starting at 2 p.m. with The Condor and the Eagle. Tickets can be found at cinematters.film. And please continue to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and attend the events till the end of the festival on Monday. Thanks everybody for joining, and I hope to see you throughout the rest of the weekend.